Welcome to another edition of Drugs, Crime, and Politics, brought to you by the Drug Policy Forum of Texas. Good evening. I'm your host, Buford Terrell. With me tonight, my colleague, Clayton Jones.
Evening.
And we're going to be spending a lot of time tonight talking about the Caravan for Peace with Justice and Dignity that rolled through Houston yesterday and today. So perhaps I should have said, Buenas tardes, bienvenidos. So we'll get to that in a minute. Pardon my Spanish. You've heard about all of it. I'm willing to try in public. But before we get to talking about the caravan, there are a few other stories we want to at least mention. I do want to stress, however, that when we get to talking about the caravan, if any of you attended either the rally or the vigil yesterday or the press conference this morning, please call us and share what you did and what you thought about it with us. We would love to have your insight into what was going on. We'll have the phone number up on the screen in a few minutes or so. But before we get to the caravan, there was more big news out of Houston this last week.
Oh, you mean those 41?
Yeah. The DEA, leading mixed teams of state troopers and Harris County deputies, executed 60 warrants, primarily on private houses in the Houston area.
I think 41 of them were grow houses.
Of those 60 houses, they found what they claim were marijuana grow operations in about 40 of them. And they also claim they found a warehouse that was storing things like grow lights. Now, this is an investigation that's been going on for months. I'd hate to think how many tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars they spent on this with investigations and surveillances and everything else. They had warrants, and warrants are supposed to be based on probable cause. Yet here we have 60 warrants executed, and only 2/3 of them turned up anything. That seems like a pretty low standard of probable cause to me.
Well, let's face it, they don't like probable cause. They like just doing what they like to do.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting. Last show we were talking about the big outdoor raid up near Livingston.
30,000 plants?
30,000 plants on 640 acres. How many plants did they claim to have found with these raids this week?
14,000.
Okay. And, you know, it seems to me that if the drug warriors were winning, we wouldn't be having these large-scale commercial operations, practically speaking, right out in the open in the middle of where we all live.
Oh, yeah. I mean, marijuana is everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more plentiful, it's cheaper, it's better quality. They're not doing anything to prevent what's happening.
Well, you know, and to some extent, I think we have to look at something else about it that's quite counterproductive. Every bit of that marijuana that they destroyed that came from the farm at Livingston or that came out of these Houston grow houses were produced and would have been sold locally and either consumed locally or shipped off to other places. Not 1 gram of it would have come from a Mexican cartel.
Yep.
I mean, it would be awfully easy to put the cartels out of business because, frankly, we can do it better and cheaper ourselves.
There are so many examples all over the world
Yeah.
on how to do it,
Yeah,
and it's working.
yeah. And the other thing is that if we look, I mean, I was reading the big story in the Chronicle about it. And people were renting expensive, high-dollar houses in exclusive neighborhoods. I mean, some of them, supposedly, the rent was $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And what they claim the growers were doing, first they were digging ditches to unlawfully tap into the underground electric supplies
Right.
to bypass a meter. Second, they were knocking out ceilings in some of the bedrooms so that they could install ventilation vents and dispose of some of the odor. Third, they were piping irrigation systems from the bathrooms all over the house. And some of the property owners were suggesting they might be out $10,000 or $15,000 to repair the houses if they get them back.
Well, you know, I've seen those pictures on TV, and I've known growers,
Yeah,
and there isn't a grower around that's going to leave a place that big of a mess that they showed on TV. Because one, you've got mold, you've got bugs, you've got all kinds of pathogens that are going to get in there.
one of the things, the mess you saw in the pictures,
Yeah.
a large part of that was police created.
Yes.
Because when they conduct a raid, they literally destroy the place they go into. But what I was leading up to, if you take this combination of grow lights, fertilizers, electricity, irrigation, we can look around the city of Houston and we can find all sorts of places where on the legal side of the fence we have farmers growing, say tomatoes or cantaloupes in hothouses that do exactly these same kinds of advanced high-tech horticultural practices. They're not putting anyone at risk. They're not creating any environmental hazards.
No.
They keep their operations clean, and they turn out good products. And it's been a while, but the last time I checked, out-of-season hothouse tomatoes were selling for like 99 cents a pound.
Yeah.
So,
That's what we're telling you marijuana is worth.
I'm not sure it would cost as much as a tomato. I mean, of course, quality varies, and
Well, quality from outdoors to indoors is night and day.
yeah,
I mean, indoors you can take a plant and you can put the best quality coming out of that plant as possible.
well, we've had this discussion before, but I compare it to the wine market. There are some people that, well, my brother-in-law, for instance, his preferred drink was some sort of really cheap rosé out of a box. But on the other hand, you can go into an upscale wine shop and you can find wines that run anywhere from $1.99 a bottle to $19,999 a bottle. There's one for every price. The same thing happens with cigars.
Yes.
You can still, as Mark Twain used to joke about, the cigars he bought from a nickel a barrel, they cost a little bit more than that today, but you can spend anywhere from 50 cents for a cigar up to
$10.
$100 for a cigar.
When I lived in Mexico, they had good cigars over there.
Yeah.
And it's easy.
And the same thing would happen with a legal market for marijuana. Would there still be swag on that like you buy on the streets that would sell for a nickel or a penny a joint? Yeah. But could you buy selected specialist strains that are hand-grown and pampered and still pay $500 or $1,000 an ounce for it if you're a connoisseur? Certainly. But that's what a market means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the second story I wanted to mention tonight came out of Chicago. Chicago this year has run up a larger number of homicides, particularly gun-related homicides, than it has any time in recent history. And I mean going back 40, 50 years or longer. The police have been claiming it's because the story I've been following is that many of the drug distributing gangs had lost most of their upper and middle level leaders, and there were a bunch of young kids fighting it out to take over the gangs, and they didn't know what they were doing. Some police officer who claims to be an authority because he was once a DEA agent said he believed that it was the Mexican cartels moving in and taking over in Mexico, and he knew this because he used to work for the DEA, and he knew Mexican cartels grew a lot of marijuana.
And he knows what he's talking about.
But anyway, in an attempt to cure their violence, the Chicago police went out and made 300 arrests today. I hate to tell you this, Chicago police, but it won't work. That's not the way to go about it.
If these are the people that are fighting for drug territories, and they just put these people that are fighting for drug territories in jail, it's just going to start a whole new rash of violence.
Just lets another bunch of punks trying to
get in. I mean, there's got to be some mid-level people there.
The difference is there is one particular approach. Came out of Boston. It's been applied in a dozen cities around the country successfully, in which police team up with community service organizations, educational groups, job training and finding groups, healthcare providers, public housing authorities. They do a lot of investigation, and in every case they found out that the violence could be linked to a surprisingly small number of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
In Boston, when they looked at it, it was something like a dozen to 15 were responsible for almost all of the violence in the whole city. They then get this small group together in a meeting and say, we know who you are, we've got your records, we're going to come get you, and if we do, you're going down on a federal rap in a prison a long way from home in a system that has no probation. We know who you are and we're coming after you. And by simply concentrating on that handful of people, making sure that the rest of the community knew about the social services that were available and taking some outreach there. This particular kind of tightly targeted operation has done marvels in cleaning up violence in a bunch of cities. So,
you know, this is your program. We'd like you to call in with any questions you have.
Yeah. Yes, and please. And one other story before we go to the Caravan. This was a repeat from the Austin American-Statesman in the Chronicle this morning. Just a few years back, the state legislature passed a felony prostitution law.
Mm-hmm. 07.
In that, if a woman was convicted of prostitution 3 times within a certain period of time, instead of a misdemeanor conviction, she could be sentenced up to 2 years in a state jail on a state jail felony. Well, that's worked marvelously. They have convicted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women for felony prostitution.
So now we have hundreds
the
and hundreds
state jails are full. They're running over. They don't know what to do with it. The state prison officials, the corrections officers, to some extent the prosecutors and even the legislatures are saying there's got to be something else. They're moving a lot of these women out of the state jails. They find out many of them, if not most of them, have drug abuse problems, so they're putting them in rehab situations, counseling, job assistance.
Mm-hmm.
They find out that the whole rehab therapy route costs about $4,000 per year per person, as opposed to the $18,000 a year that keeping them locked up does. And the number of repeat offenders goes way down. There's even a lot of talk now about repealing the felony prostitution law. So,
well, it seems like we keep trying to shoot ourselves in the foot. We just make things a little bit worse.
You know, Texas has been real funny. We were one of the first get tough on drug states. We grew a horrible prison system as a result of it, so bad the federal courts came in and made us change our ways. We did some marvelous things with the prison system. We started using diversion and alternatives. We've cut the prison population way back, but the legislature still keeps screaming tough on crime.
Put them in jail.
Coming up with felony prostitution laws. They will not look at changing marijuana laws. And now, since California went broke, once again, we're the largest prison system in the country. It's just insane.
I think we'd be like third or fourth in the world if we were a country.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it's time to start looking at the Caravan, and I want to start with a little history lesson.
Okay.
In 1964, which is about as close to 50 years ago as you can get,
I was 16.
There was another bus that came through Houston. This was an old 1937 International Harvester school bus, painted up in gaudy, bright colors. The bus had the name Further. And if Steve can find it, I've got a picture of Further to show you. Well, why am I bringing up this ancient history? Well, for one of the things, the bus trip that Further made from coast to coast in 1964 was to celebrate the glories and benefits of LSD. And it was one of the real kickoffs for the 60s counterculture. And it was one of the main reasons why Richard Nixon started the horrible war on drugs.
We can blame it on that bus?
Not totally on the bus, but I'm going to blame part of it on that bus. There's Further, and as you can see, it's not exactly your most normal-looking bus. A little bit later after this trip, in fact, the head musician that rode on that bus on some of its other gigs was one Jerry Garcia. But that bus made it all the way from California to the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, it was partially responsible for kicking off the war on drugs, which has been running for 40 years now, disastrously.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought Further up because Houston had another bus, this time a whole caravan of buses, stop here yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It too was a set of buses going from West Coast to East Coast. The Caravan for Peace with Justice and Dignity, which left San Diego and is from San Diego taking about a month to get all the way to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And it stops at cities along the way.
It was here yesterday and today.
It was here yesterday, here this morning, left, was supposed to go to New Orleans, but I understand they've changed their route and they're going to Jackson instead. New Orleans and hurricanes are not a good mix, so, but these buses are full primarily of Mexican citizens who have had a family member killed, kidnapped, lost due to the drug violence in Mexico.
Yes.
The inspiration was a Mexican poet, Javier Salicia, whose son was killed by drug dealers. And he organized two of these caravans, one from Mexico City to the border, the other from the border to Mexico City. This caravan left San Diego with buses full primarily of these surviving family members. They've stopped at cities along the way. Texas has gotten more than most states, with stops in El Paso, Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston. And they were here in Houston yesterday for a rally in the afternoon, and then they went.
I was there.
Yeah. They went and had a candlelight procession from, I believe, St. Stephen's Church to the Rothko Chapel, where they had a nighttime vigil. And then this morning they had a press conference with a speech by Salicia at the Baker Institute at Rice. And Clayton, you were there for at least part of it yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there for the rally yesterday and this morning. There was a lot of enthusiasm for what they were doing. I had a hard time. There was a lot of Spanish in it.
Yeah.
And my Spanish isn't as good as it should be, but these were people that you could see that their heart was being torn out as they told you their stories. It was really sickening to see it. It's just that many people have been that traumatically.
Oh, let me ask, how large was the crowd that showed up?
Oh, yesterday, large. Yeah. They had a auditorium room. I imagine there was at least 100 people, if not more. Yeah. And then this morning, James Baker Institute, the downstairs auditorium, it was damn near full.
Yeah.
There was a great turnout on it.
Well, you know, one thing that disappointed me is that today I was able to watch two of the local network affiliates' newscasts, and neither one of them even mentioned it. The Chronicle this morning had one black and white photograph of Salicia on an inside page in the local section. Most of the time across the country, as I've been following this, the newspapers in each city have given fairly prominent coverage to it. Usually a story in advance and one after, talking about what went on. But the Austin paper apparently has done nothing with it. As I say, one grainy black and white photograph inside the Houston Chronicle with no story accompanying it. Don't know what was going on there.
I don't know. They've been getting great press all the way across the country so far. I mean, they even got to meet with Apio.
Yeah.
Out there in Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Yeah, and he declined their invitation to come down and visit.
Well, in El Paso, it went even further than that. In response to what they said in El Paso, the city council, by a vote, I believe 4-0, passed a resolution calling for an open, serious debate on drug laws at both the state and federal level.
Well, somebody at the federal level will threaten the city that they'll lose some kind of money if they do.
You mean like Ben Reyes did a few years back when the city council did the same thing?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah. Well, there are two other interesting things about the Caravan. They've had a police escort all the way, but not active duty current policemen. LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is a nonprofit association
I
of
seen their vehicle yesterday.
primarily former policemen, prosecutors, DEA agents,
And a few judges.
and a few judges, provided their own patrol car and have provided a police escort for the Caravan so far. And they've been speaking out some. As I say, once again, if any of you attended any of the 3 events here in Houston, or even if you've managed to see any of them earlier, please call us and share us your stories. We will have a slideshow of some of the things that happened here in Houston. And then later in the program, we expect a call from Dean Becker with the Drug Truth Network, who is accompanying the Caravan on its whole long trip. So we'll be back in a minute.
Good evening. You're watching Drugs, Crime, and Politics on Houston Media Source.
Welcome back to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. I'm Buford Terrell. I'm here with Clayton Jones. We've been watching clips made at the Caravan for Peace in Houston yesterday and this morning. And before we go any further, I need to make a small correction. I said that the police escort all the way was provided by LEAP. I've been informed that at least for the street procession to the Rothko Chapel, the Houston Police Force did provide some escort duty and intersection control for the marchers. So thank you to the Houston Police. And once again, if any of you were here for any of the events in Houston or at any of the earlier events between San Diego and Houston, please call and share your stories with us. Okay.
Now, what about Illinois? There was a couple of good things that happened up there.
Oh?
2 years ago, the Illinois state legislation made it against the law for you to record a police officer in doing his duties.
Yeah.
They arrested a man for selling his art on the street corner without the right permit.
Yeah.
And he had his tape recorder on to protect his own self.
Yeah.
And they found the tape recorder and they've charged him with felony eavesdropping.
Well, you know, for a large part of my teaching career, I taught First Amendment law.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that that statute would probably last about a microsecond once it gets to a federal court.
Well, it's working its way up through.
Yeah, it is a blatant violation of the First Amendment rights of speech, assembly, petition, and press. And I don't care how many legislatures say it.
They can't do it.
They do not have the power to keep someone from filming or recording anything that occurs in public on the public streets. And in fact, I have been saying to some time, anytime you see a policeman doing anything, make a video of it. I would like to even see them be required to wear video cameras anytime they are on duty, on their uniforms, just like they're required to have dash cams in their police cars anytime they make a stop.
But that would leave too many gaps for mistakes to be made and be uncovered.
Yeah. What it would do would be fill the gaps. And it would totally remove from the courthouse he said arguments, because it would all be on the record. The police have no rights under the Constitution to act privately or secretly. I think that even if we really got down to it, the courts should stop the police from masking their badges when they make a raid or arrest, or from wearing masks. They are public servants. They are employees of the people. We have the right to know precisely what they do and say every second that they're working for us. And what the police have trouble understanding is that the Constitution's role is to make their work harder. If you want to make the police job easier, you form a government like Stalin did or like Hitler did, where the police can do anything.
But now, in Illinois, let me get this straight. They can tap your phone without a warrant.
No.
Yes, they can. There's a law there that says that they can.
Okay, they cannot tap it. They can get information about the communications without a warrant.
No. What Illinois did is they have passed a law that has said that the police with speedy information, because drug transactions happen too fast to have to go get warrants, so they say that they need this tool for enforcement.
Once again, First Amendment says no. Absolutely no.
And
this goes back.
Thousands of dollars are we going to spend going through this court situation and have nothing to show for it.
Well, now, we don't talk about it often, and you know, you pull one of my serious chains here, Clayton. I'll probably come nearer getting mad about the First Amendment than anything else that comes up. But the war on drugs has gone a long way toward completely destroying the Bill of Rights.
Oh, yeah.
What it's done to search and seizure law is, oh, it's beyond belief. And now they're attacking the First Amendment in the same way. A policeman who is not operating under tight, rigid controls is nothing but a thug and a gangster in a blue suit.
Well, I'll go a little further than that. When they don't have any kind of supervision around them, they're thugs.
Well, not only supervision around them, supervision over them. One of the fights that's taken place frequently all across the country has been attempts to impose civilian review boards over police activities.
We need it.
That's something that should be automatic in every city. But the police have fought it tooth and nail, and only a handful of cities across the country have been able to install them. But any action on duty by a policeman should be subject to full review by someone who is not in any way connected to the police or law enforcement establishment.
Right.
And by connected to that, I mean district attorneys or other prosecutors. It needs to be reviewed by someone totally outside the system.
Totally independent.
Yeah.
Yes. But they fight it.
Yeah.
They don't want to get...
Well, the problem is, and it goes back ever since we've had police. And remember, we haven't had police all of that long. They only started showing up in the 1830s and 40s. You'll find absolutely no mention of the police anywhere in the Constitution.
No.
They have no constitutional standing whatsoever. But the police always have viewed their job as getting the bad guys. And when that happens, they act just like any other vigilante or crook. Their job should be to enforce the law.
Right.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, Buford, this is Dean calling in.
Hello, how's your seat doing after this time on the buses?
Well, it's not bad. The vehicle is real nice. It's a Lincoln Navigator with all the bells and whistles to adjust the seat and angles and back support, so it's not so bad.
Okay.
But the journey has really become, I think, one of awakening the people in all these towns we come to, because anybody who hears the message we have to share understands a little more than they did before, and that's really the goal, is to educate and embolden our fellow citizens to speak about this crazy drug war.
Yeah, well, have you been able to get any feedback from the people in the towns you've been going through?
Well, a couple of stories I'll share with you. Yesterday, I was making some copies of a speech I've been working on, and I went into the office depot when I talked to the lady about the Caravan for Peace and told her a bit about it. By the time she was done making the copies, she handed them to me and said, "This one's on me. I want you guys to succeed."
Wonderful.
A couple of days before, we were in Laredo, Texas, and pulled into Taco Cabana, it was, and the other couple guys I was riding with were late coming out of the bathroom. I was talking to the guy at the checkout counter, asked him if he had heard. He said no, but he was from Hungary, and he started witnessing to me how the Russians had rolled in, and things gone to heck real quick, all the civil rights, human rights that disappeared. And he says, "I know what's happening in Mexico," and he gave me a 50% discount on our order.
Wow.
There at Taco Cabana. So people get it when they hear the story.
Well, I think I read somewhere that in one of the valley towns, one of the law enforcement officers actually came out and made a rather surprising comment in support of the Caravan.
Well, this is true. We were in, what was the name of that? I think it was El Paso.
Yeah.
It gets kind of hazy after a while.
I'm sure it does.
8 or 10 towns in 8 or 10 days.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I talked, there was 3 law enforcement, local sheriff's deputies, and we just addressed them. You know, hey, did you know that when alcohol prohibition ended, it was juries refusing to convict and officers refusing to arrest that convinced politicians it was time to change laws. I asked them everywhere I go, how many gangs you got in this town? You realize that they will lose their profit and most of their power when we legalize drugs, and they all nod their heads in agreement.
Yeah.
So folks are beginning to realize this drug war makes no sense, even those wearing the badge.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I understand that you've had to change directions for tonight and tomorrow, though.
Well, sure. The fact with that hurricane threatening New Orleans, they've actually blocked off all the incoming lanes there on I-10. Everything's going out, so we couldn't get to New Orleans if we tried.
Okay.
But we're going on to Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
We've got some actions there, and you know, here in a few days we're hoping to climb over the same bridge Martin Luther King did with our Caravan, and maybe get a 1/10 the attention and focus that he did, but it's still talking about human rights.
Right.
You know, what makes this journey, this Caravan, more difficult is that each day I hear stories that just rip your heart out, that makes the tears flow. That you know, the other day when we were in Alamo, Texas, a lady got up on stage. She spoke nothing but Spanish. I really didn't understand a word.
Yeah.
But the emotion she had kind of just flowed like a wave and swept over me, and I cried again without knowing what she was talking about.
Yeah.
Because these people have their children stolen. They're you know, they can't find the bodies. You even hear some of the mothers talk about they hope their daughter is a sex slave.
Yeah.
Because they're still alive if they are.
Yeah.
They can't find them, but that's their hope.
Well, one question I wanted to ask, which kind of goes the other way, and this is, have you been hearing any comments from the Mexican participants about what kind of reception they've been getting in this country?
Well, I did. I actually did an interview one-on-one with Javier Cecilia, the Mexican poet who's leading the Caravan. He seems rather disappointed by the turnout, especially due to the fact that the vast majority of those turning out are fellow Latinos.
Yeah.
And very few whites are showing up. The media coverage has been, at least on the national scale, has been minimal.
I've not heard anything on the national scale. Yeah.
Yeah, as far as, you know, CBS Morning News or, you know, one of those. But the fact of the matter is that much of the footage that was in California was being shown in Colorado and Texas.
Yeah. But not in Houston.
No. I invited several reporters I know in the Houston area to come to today's event, and as far as I know, none of them showed up.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's an issue whose time has come, but those who have stood in support of this drug war now find it kind of hard to admit the error of their ways, the failure to truly report on what this war is about.
Well, you're aiming at Washington, and supposedly will end up there. Are there any particular plans for what's going to happen in Washington?
Well, there are. I'm riding with Neil Franklin, the leader of law enforcement against prohibition, and I hear him talking to folks in Baltimore, in Washington D.C., arranging for police escorts, you know, into the city, into the parks, the venues where some of these events are held. I think the East Coast looks to be a little more coordinated and organized than the first segments, but we were well received by many of the cities in the Southwest. El Paso in particular comes to mind. That when the buses showed up, they were treated almost like royalty.
Well,
almost
El Paso,
singing Hosanna because they showed up. It was really a good experience. I think, for El Paso and for the people on the Caravan.
Well, as I understand, El Paso, the city council actually passed a resolution in response to the Caravan.
The resolution passed after a little bit of disagreement on how to phrase the section dealing with guns in these United States, and another one. Ironically, there was a city councilman named Dr. No, and he objected to some of the phrasing. He said we can't leave in there the portion that says we need to talk about the drug war, because we know if we talk about the drug war, somebody will bring up the word legalized, and I'm not for legalization.
So let's just hide our eyes and not even talk about it, huh?
Exactly, Dr. No. It's like you stepped out of a James Bond movie, you know. But all in all, it was well received. I would recommend that folks tune into my radio shows, which are now posted at drugtruth.net. The first half hour is the Cultural Baggage Show.
Yes.
And that features much of the within the El Paso City Council meeting. And then the second show is Century of Lies, and it features my one-on-one interview with Javier Cecilia, the leader of the Caravan. And then also a couple of segments I captured. One was a Fox-produced segment, which talked about the fact that since the Bush II era on into the Obama administration, there's been an agreement with the Sinaloa cartel, Shorty Guzman's cartel, that he's been allowed to bring his drugs into the United States as long as he cooperates and helps to eliminate the Zetas and the Leon Bartrell. Anyway, many of the other drug cartels down there. And so he's serving as a snitch and informant on behalf of the United States. And the other story is from CBS, which talks about the city of Chicago, where the death rate is up 30% this year. And they talk about the fact that the same man, Shorty Guzman of the Sinaloa cartel, is coming into Chicago and trying to take over the retail trade, the real money end of the drug.
Well, I don't know if you saw it, the news today, but Chicago let loose with a string of 300 coordinated arrests today.
They did?
Yeah.
Well, okay, then they're probably trying to take down those cartels. The cartel there was a story. Within that story from CBS, there was a quote from the chief DEA agent. He said they're going to bring in 25 extra agents to counter the push by Mr. Guzman.
The problem is that the only connection I have seen between Guzman and Chicago has been through that one DEA agent. I have seen absolutely no direct evidence that the cartel is actually making any direct moves in Chicago. The stories I get, the gang violence in Chicago is the other way around, that it's local gangs that have lost too many of their leaders and middle-level leaders to arrest and shootouts that are now shooting it out with each other to rebuild their own turf. This Mexican cartel seems to be, as near as I can tell from everything, just a boogeyman scare story perpetrated by the DEA.
Well, they've got to have their hysteria to make the drug war work, because without the murder, madness, and mayhem, people might realize that, heck, if we just trusted adults and arrested them for their actions instead of the contents of their pocket, all of this would go away.
Yeah. Well, you've got another several days in front of you and a lot more of the country to see, so I know...
Oh, it's the biggest tour of America I've ever undertaken, I'll tell you that. We're destined to travel something over 7,000, perhaps over 8,000 miles before we're done with this.
That's a lot of roads to put on. When you get back, I hope you can give us a full report and maybe even have some travelogue footage to go with it.
Well, hey, Dean.
I will have plenty of video to work with, and you know, it's an honor to me to be a part of this, because, as I said, people respect what we're doing, giving us free food and you know, supply it. So it's just time for everybody to take a look at this drug war and see what what your opinions were really based on, and if they shouldn't be redirected.
Well, you know, it's a pity that your caravan can't make a stop in Tampa this week, because there are a bunch of yo-yos in Tampa that really need to hear the message.
I wish we could.
Yeah.
I wish we could, because yes, they do need to hear it.
Okay.
Well, hey, Dean, you're going to have a little bit of reprieve when you get to Lexington. They've already submitted a bill in the Senate for medical marijuana.
Well,
Senator
that's good
Clark.
to hear.
Yes.
Here, Arkansas is also looking to vote on it this fall.
Apparently it's on the ballot there, yeah.
Yeah.
And Massachusetts.
It's time. It's just time, isn't it?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, we just don't have that option here in Texas, do we?
Nope.
But you know, I keep hearing people like Russ Bellevue. Every time anything comes up about legalization and where we live, his words are, move west. If we all move west, there's going to be nobody left here to try to make it right.
Okay.
Well, if only we could. I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you. Well, I tell you what, these guys are going to want to get rolling again. We're eating our dinner here, Podunk, Louisiana. I don't know. And, they need to get back to it, but heck, in 2 weeks I could do this again and still be on the road.
Okay. We look forward to it, and have some jambalaya for us.
Will do. All right, you guys. Y'all stay safe.
Okay.
You too.
Thank you, Dean.
All right, bye-bye.
And that was Dean Becker from the Drug Truth Network. He is a longtime show friend and participant in our show as well, and we look forward to having him back.
Oh, he's really a good ally.
Before we go too long, we need to talk about the decoration on your chair tonight, Clayton. I don't know if any of you can recognize it, but it is a replica of a colonial era or early American flag.
Can you catch that on camera?
Yeah, he's got it. Now, the interesting thing about this flag that makes it historically appropriate as well is that this flag is made out of hemp cloth, just like most of the ones in the Revolutionary period were made. So if you want to know what hemp looks like in a historical context, we have a hemp flag for you.
And didn't we have to buy this out of the country? Can't buy a hemp flag?
This particular one was made in Nepal because apparently no one in America right now is manufacturing hemp flags.
Right.
So, but one other thing happened that kind of has my curiosity up. Old Ironsides, the Navy ship in Boston, made famous during the War of 1812, recently was taken out on a sail around Boston Harbor to celebrate her 215th birthday. And when I saw pictures of Old Ironsides sailing, I couldn't help but wonder, the Navy has been very good and very authentic about restoration and keeping her built correctly, but I couldn't help but wonder if, like the original, all of the sails and all of the ropes and rigging on that ship were made out of hemp. The old sailing Navy could not exist without hemp sails, hemp ropes, and hemp paper is also an important part of American heritage. You want to add anything particularly before we run out of time tonight?
No, I just think that we're seeing a lot of good things happening.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stumbling blocks out there that they're trying to throw in front of us, but I think they're all going to get overcome. I think come November, I've been saying it, I think we're going to see a whole new landscape.
Well, I see particularly one landscape change in November, but I think it may be one of the most important ones. I'm feeling fairly confident now that the legalization memorandum will pass in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to make predictions on any of the others out there yet, but that one is starting to look pretty definite to me.
I thought that Oregon's looked pretty good too.
It looks pretty good, but I'm not willing to put it in the win column
Washington is the one that I'm kind of skeptical about.
But once one state legalizes, it presents the federal government with a dilemma that they just really can't solve. There's no way that they can put the genie back in the bottle once that one state goes and legalizes marijuana. There are already complaints that Colorado's medical marijuana is oozing across the state lines into the surrounding states.
But of course.
The DEA simply doesn't have enough agents, and the federal government doesn't have enough attorneys or judges or courtrooms to step in and enforce the federal marijuana laws in Colorado if the state is not their willing accomplice in this. And if everyone in Colorado is smoking, it's going to spread elsewhere very, very quickly.
Governor Chafee in Rhode Island is fed up also.
Yeah.
He says that if one of them switches, he's switching.
Yeah. So it's that I think is the ultimate tipping domino. If Colorado goes, I think we're all going to be surprised at how quickly the changes come.
And I think not only are the changes going to be here, they're going to be all down through South America and Central America.
Well, those are already changed now. And they're changing, but, you know, one way or another, they don't really affect us much of what we do much. They change a little bit of the atmosphere at international conferences, but it still doesn't really put much pressure on us or what we do. So, yeah, it's nice to see it happen. It changes the international dialogue a little, but in terms of effective power, it just doesn't do anything.
Okay.
Usually, I end the night by recommending that you write your representatives. Today, I want you to aim it a little bit closer to home. I want a lot of people to write letters to the editor, to the Houston Chronicle, complaining because they didn't even bother to say anything about the Caravan. Thank you. Good night. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And I think I misunderstood my signal, and what I thought was 1 minute was 1 second was 1 minute. So yeah.
We're done.
We have these private prisons that have now hired lobbyists to go get minimum mandatories in you.
I began to understand that the 17 or the 19-year-old kid I had in the backseat of my police car was not a criminal at all.
Remove the profit motive. If you remove the profit motive, you can do away with almost all these problems. And how do you do that? Simple. The end prohibition, which can only mean one thing. Legalize drugs. Legalize oral drugs.
If we really want to improve our urban neighborhoods, the most important thing that we could do, the single most important thing that we could do, is end the war on drugs.